Hi, welcome to SharePoint Recovery Demonstration for the Unitrends System Administration course. In this how-to video tutorial, we're going to take a look at creating SharePoint recovery jobs. We're going to perform a simple farm recovery. We're going to walk through that process. We're also going to mount a farm for granular recovery. Once again, when we look at our interface here, and when we're thinking about the first decision we kind of have to make and really determines on where we're going to go and what we're going to log into, is you have to look at what type of recovery you have to do for this SharePoint instance. Are you bringing your farm back from a physical disaster on site, your server's corrupted, you're trying to rebuild your farm? Or are you in DR mode and you're going off the hot site? Are you trying to go through an audit and you need to bring back 6 months ago's version of your SharePoint? That's going to determine what appliance you're going to log into. Depending if you're going off the hot target, you'd log in over on your hot target. You'd make sure that you had a SharePoint asset registered on that hot target offsite. If you're going long-term, you're going back months to recreate for an audit, then you have to go back to cold storage. Maybe you're pulling back last year's version. Now remember, we learned this in the presentation for SharePoint Recovery that it's really recommended to build a new farm and then do more granular recovery to build your farm back. Especially if you have, more of a full farm configured. If you have a single server farm, you can do a simple recovery back and put the entire farm back from a point in time, and it's extremely easy. But, most people run a more complex farm. They have to rebuild the farm or the individual servers for the farm and then use the granular recovery to put the individual objects back. Now, once again, before you start any kind of recovery, when you first log into your appliance, make sure you're checking for any outstanding alerts. Make sure you don't have any outstanding error messages and, address those if you have to. But really, you want to make sure you don't have any outstanding active jobs currently running right now that are going to affect your recovery that you're trying to do. Make sure you're not running any agent-based backups against that asset, no virtual snapshots against that asset. Make sure that in your job manager, if you take a look at your schedules that are going to run across that asset, that those aren't scheduled to kick off anytime soon. 11 o'clock tonight. Remember, our agent-based file level backup 24-hour a day contains our SQL SharePoint server here. That's not going to run until 3 o'clock in the morning. And this asset is also part of the VMware 24-hour, which is going to run tonight at 9 o'clock. So for the next, few hours, I don't have to worry about any backups running against this asset. You can check a few different ways to make sure you have a current backup for the asset or the farm you want to put back. You can go into, once again, the protection summary. You can filter across the asset name here first, which would be the SQL SharePoint server. And then in this big list, you'll notice true and false. We're not protecting every asset on this agent. Here's our farm down here, so I could filter on true over here to make this list even smaller. Then if I have multiple farms, I may filter on some part of the farm name. You can filter those right down. Now I could down here just cut right to the chase and filter on the farm. You could also do that up here. You could just filter on the farm. There's the same status. Right? A lot of different ways to read these reports back here. I really like this protection summary. You can see what schedule it's a part of, when it ran last, how many recovery points you have going back to the 12th of March here, the last 7 days. We've shown you in the other modules how you can use the Protect tab. You can go down to the actual asset itself. You can see the farm and the status going back here to Monday. So you can see here I've got a success on Monday going back all the way to last Friday, but I don't have any backups for Friday in here. No backups in here yet today. I do have one from last night. That's the recovery point that we're going to use. You can't recover from here. Once again, this is only status to kind of see where you're at. Just like all the other applications, all of your recovery starts here in the Recover tab under the Backup Catalog. You can filter over here on the asset you're looking for. Now, putting back a simple single server farm, you can go to any recovery point and you can restore the entire simple single farm just by clicking Save here. It will overwrite the farm and put it back from this recovery point. It's very easy. I'm not going to go through that process. It's extremely easy to put back a single individual SharePoint farm. It tells you in there, by the way, too, if you didn't see it, that the SharePoint farm will be recovered to its original location. To recover individual SharePoint items, use the file recovery options to create a file recovery object. And that's the real thing I want to show you admins how to do, is really just create these mount points, because it's really what you're going to do. You're going to build a new farm server, you're going to use the granular recovery, and you're going to put your objects back. Doesn't matter what recovery point. If you look back at that module that we went through, you can identify your backup, whether it's a local backup imported from a cold target, or you're sitting on your hot target and you've got a server running SharePoint registered on it. You don't even have to have, in a case of granular, a SharePoint server up and running yet. It's going to mount it right off of the appliance. That's what we're going to show you here. Now, what the options here we're talking about is, once again, up here in the toolbar, instead of using recover the whole farm, there's recover files in here. Right? So when you go to recover files, once again, just like the other file level recovery objects for Exchange, VMware, Hyper-V, Oracle does the same thing basically. We can create a file level recovery object in here for this asset and this point in time. So when I create that file level recovery object in here, you'll see it show up in just a few seconds in here inside of this area starting to be created. There it goes. So there's my available farm. You can go in and view the details of it. You can go to this address right here. What's really cool is if I copy this address and I paste it into my browser, it's going to pull up my SharePoint admin console right off the Unitrends appliance. I can then use this session for my central admin for SharePoint to open up Kroll OnTrack and point Kroll OnTrack's SharePoint recovery to this piece. It's extremely cool and very easy to do. Now, the tricky part is knowing SharePoint on the back end and how all that farm stuff works, and being able to use the Kroll OnTrack to recover your itemized stuff. Once again, we have a great Kroll OnTrack video tutorial out on the website under our support video tutorial section for the SharePoint Kroll granular recovery and how that all works. We have a one for Exchange as well. All right, so here's your central admin mounted off the appliance, up and running. It's very easy. Now, this object will stay in here as long as you need to. It'll start to send you alerts after 72 hours. Once again, you're all done with your Kroll OnTrack recovery. You're going to remove this session. You're going to tear this object down. It's going to go through the appliance and tear down that share that it just created out here for the SharePoint recovery. I'm going to mount another one and show you the back side of the file and folder that it does too. Right? But it's very easy to create these. That was from a differential, and you can do one from a full too. So if I go down here and check full, you'll notice these buttons go away because they have 2 check marked. We're going to go ahead and open up this full now, create this recovery point, go over here to file level recovery. Within a couple of minutes, it'll show up in here. Once that job is started and running, then you can just open up your web browser and go to that object, the address that it gives you. You might have to view the details to get the address and the port up here, and you can go to that page. That's going to open up, once again, the central admin for this recovery point for this farm. You may have multiple farms. All right, you're going to use the Kroll OnTrack from this point. Check out that video tutorial. It's really cool. In the file structure back here, you'll notice if you refresh this, it does create some objects back here that Kroll can get to as well too. So it's in combination. Make sure you check out that tutorial and see how all this works together. But this is your central admin once again by going to this. But if you right-click in Chrome and just go to that address, that's your central console for this farm at that recovery point, mounted right off of the appliance. It's pretty cool. Now, once again, you're done with this. We're going to tear this down, and I am going to show you here that if you have a job out here for your farm object and this thing tonight, when it kicks off, because we did do a recovery, if I were to go ahead and run this thing now, just to give you an example, it does start this thing off, and it will promote this next scheduled backup to a full. It knows we did the recovery. We mounted it for granular recovery. It doesn't matter we didn't put the whole farm back. It doesn't even matter we didn't actually do a recovery. We just even mounted it off the appliance, and that was good enough to promote this next scheduled backup to a full. This is still in use for backups in here. Still mounted. All right, we can remove that when we're all done. You'll notice up here at the asset level, it's assigned the domain admin. It looks like that's the account it's using. So we're going to go ahead and edit this machine, and we're going to set this credential here to local admin. I know the local admin account works. We also need to make sure it still has the correct IP address in here. And we'll go ahead and save this credential setting. So now let's go back over to the Recovery tab. We're going to go ahead and filter on our farm again. We'll go to our newest full, and we'll recover the entire farm. We'll go ahead and watch this job for a few minutes. Now you can see this one's taking a little bit longer. It's actually executing the SharePoint restore now. So now we can see that it gets its rights from the agent-based asset at the file and folder level. It's getting its rights from the protected asset at the asset level here. That needed to be set to local admin. So now we can see that restore is actually going through to that SharePoint farm server. Once again, this is a simple farm restore. If you have a more complex farm, a full farm, you'll want to rebuild that farm server, mount your recovery point, and do granular recovery back to that full farm server. All right, so now we can see that restore is down off of our list here. If I go over to recent system jobs over here and sort by today's date, you'll notice that I see a SharePoint restore was started in here at 11:50. That's our restore point that we just created. You can also go over and run reports. You can run the recovery history report for today's date. If you sort it by the end time here, once again, as kind of a review, it's always best practice to rebuild your farm and perform the granular recovery. They're really simple and easy to mount and open up. Use the scroll on track and perform your recovery back, whatever you need to get back. Do it through the central admin, through SharePoint, and do the granular recovery on the backside. We have a SharePoint recovery tutorial out on the support website that you can check out for more details on how it works. But really, there is no way for us to put back a complete full farm, rebuild your farm, and use that granular recovery. That's a pretty good overview for you for SharePoint restores.